The first thing we had was he spoke about the levels of haskalah, the levels of, let's put it, effort to understand. The kafi, the midah of effort put into understanding, so also will be the midah of the dveikus you achieve through learning. That was the first thing he spoke about. That was 2 weeks ago. Last week he spoke about a fascinating issue, which was that the tikkun of the whole bria is dependent upon the learning of the whole of the Torah. Because since the bria was created, istakel b'iraisa ubara alma, since the world was created through, not that the Torah is a blueprint, but the Torah is the power of creation, and therefore every ois in the Torah represents another part in the bria, and therefore only through learning of the Kol HaTorah Kulo can one really achieve the Tikkun HaBria. So when we're talking about Tikkun HaOlam, which is a very popular subject today, Tikkun HaOlam, so Tikkun HaOlam is not done through going along the streets in a parade saying, I believe in God. That's not Tikkun HaOlam, that's Stam Narishkeiten. Tikkun HaOlam is through learning of Torah. And the more Torah that's learned in the world, the more Torah that's learned in the world, the more the Olam will be Metukan. The Olam will be Metukan. That was what we spoke about last week. And therefore, there's an inyan in learning Kol HaTorah Kula. And there, Jeff, I got a smile from Jeff last week because I spoke about Daf HaYomi, that Daf HaYomi is not only for those who have an hour to learn. There's an inyan in Daf HaYomi because there's an inyan in being learning the whole hekef of the Torah. But here Jeff is not going to smile because it doesn't finish in Bavli. It carries on in Yerushalmi and carries on in Tosefta and carries on in every single part of the Torah. Correct? Therefore, it's a good start. I mean, Daf HaYomi is a good start, but that's not the end of it. That was last week. So we've got the aspect that means Torah, because a Torah is much, much, much more than just a code book. It's much, much, much more than just enabling us, giving us over the knowledge. It's actually it's a kli to be dovuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the ultimate dveikus in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Is the dveikus in the Torah, and it's the tikkun of the bria. That's a wonderful idea. It's the tikkun of the bria. I never understood it. I mean, I mentioned it last time. I've got to tell you it again. I really never understood it. I told you the story about Rav Steinman. I never understood it then. I brought somebody, a very good friend of mine, Mr. Schimmel knows him well. I'm not going to mention any names. A young man. He's a Baal Tshuva, and he very much wanted to do good things for Klal Yisrael, really. And he wanted to help Balei Tshuva. They should be able to integrate into the tzibur more. And he had a whole load of. He made a seker. What's a seker in English? A survey about all that's needed and everything. Bekitzer, Rabban Leib Steinman. It came to Rabban Leib, and Rabban Leib said he wants to meet him. So I went with this young gentleman, a very wealthy young man, and I went with him to Rabban Leib Steinman. And I remember I said to him, when we walked into the front door, I said, I want you to understand, you're not asking a rabbi. This is not a rabbi. It's not something you can debate. If you walk into this house, you have to understand that he's telling you over. That's Das Torah means that we accept ultimately what he says is the truth. And even it might be that we don't understand it, that's it. And we walked into him, and Rabban Leib took his hand. I'll never forget it. He took his hand. I don't know. He took his hand. Is it? If it's in Ivrit, I'll go to Ivrit. Ask him. It's in Ivrit? He says to me he wants it in Ivrit. Okay. If he comes back, I'll do it in Ivrit. And he took his hand, And he said, I understand that you want to help Klal Yisrael. So he said, yes. And he said, well, I'm going to tell you, to help Klal Yisrael is not in the way that you perceive. You want to help every aspect of Klal Yisrael. There's only one way to help it. That means there should be more and more learning of Torah in Klal Yisrael. He says, I don't just mean yeshivas, and I don't just mean koilelim. I'm talking about the cheder. I'm talking about the yeshiva ktana. I'm talking about the yeshiva gdoila. I'm talking about any way that you can use your money to increase learning in Klal Yisrael. He said, the world becomes a better place. If the world becomes a better place, everything is better. And when we came out, and I'll never forget, he said to me, he's an old man. That was his, he said, he doesn't understand what's going on. And I didn't have an answer to him because rationally, it doesn't make sense. But that's what the Ramchal's just telling us. The whole world, every aspect, every facet, everything in the Olam, since everything is created by the Torah, therefore the more Torah there is, the more Torah learnt, the better the whole world is. There's nothing which remains the same. Everything is bettered. It might not be very logical or rational, but that's the truth. And that's what the Ramchal just told us. So we have the Haskalah, which enables the levels of the Dveikus, and we have the amount of learning Torah is learned, which affects the Bria. Now, hey, hatnoim hatzrichim li'islavos leTalmud Torah. Till now, I've talked about how to learn. That means A, the amount of iyun to be put in it. B, the amount of Torah to be learned. That means that the whole of Torah has to be learned. Now we're going to talk about number 3. Now I'm talking about the tnoim which are needed for somebody. Atnoim matzrichim lislavos leTalmud hinehem hayira beTalmud atzmoi v'tikun hamaisa b'choleis. So straight away, the Lashon of the Ramchal blows your mind. Mamash blows your mind. That means, again, the Ramchal, we treat him as, let's call him almost a Rishon. No words are written vague. Everything is very precise. We know there's Ahavo and there's Yiro. I know Yiras Hashem and Ahavas Hashem. What's the words that the Ramchal uses? Hatnoi matzrichim lislavos leTalmud hinehem hayiro beTalmud atzmoi. The fear of what? Of the learning itself. V'tikun hamaisa b'choleis. And this is a prerequisite to limud Torah, is the fear and also the tikkun hamaisa. So fear is the incorrect translation. We've already spoken about that before. The Yiras Hashem does awe. Perfect. The awe of what? Of the Torah itself. And it's a new one. It's something new here. There's a din, a tnai li'ikuva, which is that I should approach the limud Torah with the awe of the Torah itself. Says Ramchal, v'zeh ki ne kol koicho shel haTorah, kol koicho shel haTorah einoi elo b'ma shekosha v'tola yizborach es hashposei hayakoro bo. This was the language which the Ramchal used at the beginning of this parak. If you look back go back to page 123. Yes, Oiz base. There, when he described to us the definition of Torah, he said that it's the highest. There is the highest shefa, the highest. There's no really translation for it. This highest shefa which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave into this world, which is almost, he says, atzmusa, it's almost HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, a form of shefa velokus. The Lashon was, hu shemachalek ha'odon yizbar shemai michvoidoi v'yekoroi el bruav, he wrote in his base on page 123. He keilu gave of himself. He enabled, he gave the ability for humanity, for Klal Yisrael to bathe in his glory. You're bathing in his glory, Kaviyachol. But what? This glory, this shefa, is kosher. V'amnon kosher yizbosh be'etzashpo azois binyon hanivra v'zeu ha'Torah. It's as if the shefa, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to give it, but it's betnai. You want to receive this the shefa, you want to bathe in my glory. The only way in which you will be able to do that is if you learn the Torah. The Torah is that which is kosher to the shefa of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now here he says it again. He says, so now Torah, let's get this straight. It's not the brilliance of the Torah. It's not, and there is brilliance and genius beyond compare. The Chochmah of the Torah there's nothing which can compare to the Chochmah of the Torah. But not that is the Gadlus of the Torah. The Gadlus of the Torah is not the Chochmah. The Gadlus of the Torah is what? The fact that there is a shefa of HaKadosh Baruch Hu which is kosher to it. That means it's literally the only physical way which we can connect to godliness. We connect to godliness, we connect to Elokus through the Torah. So the Gadlus, the Goiva, the enormous, in Torah stands alone, not because of its Chochmah, but because of the Shefa of Elokus, which is dependent upon it. The Chochmah is the way that we connect to, but what is the Madrega of Torah which has no compare to anything else? That's because of the Shefa of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah on it. Therefore, says the Ramchal, Kol koicho shel haTorah ein elo b'ma shekosher v'tolo yizborch es hashpa'asa yekora bo. Ad she'alei hadibur bo. You know, this language of kosher, which he always says, which is a very strange language. Do you know why he's using this language? I don't think when you talk about kosher, you say like, you have a string. Yeah? So you're not really touching that. But let's say with a string, I can pull that towards me. It's like an indirect connection. It's not direct. Kosher means I haven't got a direct touching. I don't touch this thing directly. But since I have that which is kosher to it, so I can pull that and it'll go with me. It's like an indirect, almost direct connection. Now, Elokus, there is no way in which Odom, man, of Bosov Edom, flesh and blood, can physically connect to Elokus. But what? He's given, it's Kilu, there's what's called a Yodei Arichte. He has, do you hear me? Do you all hear me? There's like a Yodei Arichte. He's been given a way to connect, even though it's not direct, but it's the closest way he can connect direct to. That's why he calls it Kosha Hashpa Zu Batera. Because there is no way that man can literally bathe in Elokus, but I've got an indirect, almost direct connection. It's the closest form of connection which you can have. It's through that which is kosher to Elokus. That's why he's very precise definition. It's mamash a lomdish agdora. It's the closest source of kesher, which is not a kesher yashir. It's not direct, because you can't have direct ben odom lelokus, but it's the closest. But he says, so In essence, the whole mila of Torah is the shefa of Elikus, which is kosher to it. Therefore, Zulazeh, without this kesher of Elikus, which there is, Zulazeh lo hoya dibubo ela kidibu b'sha'ar sokim. It will become an intellectual study. It'll become mathematics. It'll become physics. It'll become history. It will be no more than an intellectual exercise. Any form of natural science. It becomes another form of natural science. The Torah studied to get the MA in Bar Ilan University is another natural science. That's what it is. It's a natural science. That means the minute you take away from it, its kesher, the fact that it's kosher to elokus, the minute you take away the innate spirituality which is there, you're left with what? You're left with a shell of phenomenal intellectual exercises. There is nothing which can come anywhere close to the sugya of in the beginning of Lo Yachbar. There is nothing. There's nothing can compare to it. You know, there's nothing which comes to the intricacies of the Ramban in Chazal. There's nothing which can come to the sugya of Zika. You know, Yesh Zika and Zika in Yevomis. Or they just, there is nothing. But it remains a pure intellectual exercise if you take away the kesher to Elokus. Says the Ramchal, if you take away the kesher Elokus, there's nothing more than the knowledge of the chokhmah which the sugya is talking about. Ve'ein magia mimenu hisatzmus yako umaylo klal b'nefesh hakoira. There is no shefa of elokus which is mushpa on he who learns the Torah. Hamedaber v'hamaskil v'lo tikun leklal habriya. The purpose of Torah was in order to give Bnei Yisrael the ability to come to the closest madrega of being able to bathe in the glory of the Lord, to be able to be nene miziv shchinosoi b'olam hazeh. The closest of being zeicha to shefa elokut in this world is through Torah. That's what the Torah is. The way we get to that is through haskola. And the way we get to it is from the limud of Kol HaTorah. But the minute you take away the rotzain of the Odom to be makabel the Shefa, the minute he's approached to the Torah, he's sitting down to learn it, is not to be able to be nene from the kesher lelokus. It's you've taken away all the teichen, and you're left with a pure intellectual exercise. V'omnom hashpoa zois hine inyona eloki k'mo shezachanu. This shefa, which is the outcome of limud Torah, is shefa eloki. Inyona eloki. It's beprin of elokus. It's as he said beforehand. You're sitting. You're nena michvoidoy. Your mamish is elokus. ולא יועיד אל שהוא היועיסה עליון ונשגוב שבעניונים הנמשוחים ומגיעים ממנו יסבורך אל הברואים. It's the highest shefa. It's the greatest form of connection between Odom and Boiroi, between Odom, between Elyonim and Tachtoinim. The highest form of connection is the learning of the Torah. Torah is, in essence, a form of connection. It's an ability to connect. In the same way that you understand that when a person does Daven Shmoneh Esrei, so it says he's oimed lifnei hamelech, he's oimed b'dalat hamosav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He stands in front of him. There's a kiruv miyuchedet, which is in the time of Shemoneh Esrei. And that's why I told you what the shlosh says, that you shouldn't move, you shouldn't shuckle, and your voice shouldn't be sounded, because then you're doimet HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If the koil d'mamodaka of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to imitate the koil d'mamodaka to be able to connect. All that is klum, garnished, l'umat the connection which there is in Limud Torah. Torah is the ability to connect HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what it is. And Haskalah and all the things that we do are just the ways to bring that connection into being. Says the Ramchal, V'kiven shekein vadai, sheyesh lo la'odom liroi v'liroid ba'oskei binyan zeh. Man should shake and shiver. Literally, shake and shiver when he's sitting and learning. Why? Shenimtzo shuhu nigosh lifnei Eloikov. There's anything you can add on the words of the Ramchal. You're just ruining it. He says it all. When a person is sitting and learning Torah, he's touching God. He's touching God. He's touching God. And there's no other way in the world that man in any way can touch it. You can't. Even tefillah, which is the closest form, it's nothing like this. There's nowhere does it say that you have to shiver and shake. You don't shiver and shake before you daven. There's no shivering and shaking. The reason why most people shuckle is only because they've got hyperactivities. And the only way they can concentrate for 10 minutes is if they're shuckling. There's no chiyuv to shake. There's no din of to be riot. There's no mitzias of shaking and shivering. Says the Ramchal, if a person knew what he was doing when he opens the Daf Gemara, do you know what he would be doing? He'd be shivering and shaking. Do you know why? Because he's now touching God. He's the closest he can ever be, ever, to having even kimat a physical connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is mamash, after you read this, you understand what Rabbi J.B. Soloveitchik said. I mean, this is wonderful in the halachic man. The mystics thought that men connect with God by making them, by having an out-of-body experience and moving up into the higher hemispheres until this out-of-bodily spirit touches God. And little did they understand, he says, that the closest way of touching God is down on our world in the Dalet Amoy Shel Halacha. God doesn't want out-of-body experiences. He gave us the ability to have an in-body experience. And that's Dalet Amoy Shel Halacha. And these are the words of the Ramchal here. Why should he shiver and shake, says the Ramchal? Again, Vadai sheyesh le'odom liroi v'liroid ba'oskei binyan zeh, shenimtzo hu nigosh lifnei Eloikov. He is touching him. He's standing in front of him. Umisasek b'amshochas ha'oir hagodol mimenu elov. Can you imagine? Picture it. You're standing there, pulling down Shefa of Elokus, Kvoidoi. And remember the Lashon he said at the beginning? What is Torah again? Masha mechalek ha'odam yizborch shmei michvoidoi v'ikoroi el bruov. He says, this Shefa is me'en hametzius ho'amiti. This is the Ramchal at the beginning in his base. Me'en hametzius ha'amiti shelo yizborach. It's as if I am here pulling down Kavayochel v'Kadosh Baruch Hu to me, you wouldn't be shaking and shivering. Carries on the Ram. What? Yeah, exactly. Carries on the Ramchal. He says, Vinei, tzorch sheyevosh mishiflusei o enoshi. Here we come on to what we spoke about before. The awe. It's kilu kavayochel. I'm standing in front of the omnipresence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The awe. Me ani, who am little I, that I've given the ability to touch God, to touch Him. He comes down and takes the form, kavayochel, of something which I can connect to. V'yirash mirei memusoi yizbarach. Mirei memusoi. And at the same time, listen to the wonderful. V'nei yogel ma'oid michelkei atoiv shezocholonu. Ach birodo kamoiken. There's two experiences which are happening at the same time. And this is literally like there's Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. Here in learning Torah, there's both of these emotional experiences happening at the same time. Mitzad echad, you stand in awe of the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is willing to come to me. He's willing to take a form which I can physically connect to. Pachad Noiro. I'm standing in front of Melech Malchi Amlochim. Not just standing in front of him, I am having a physical connection to him. And at the same time that I'm standing here with all the awe, there's an enormous simcha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was willing to do this for me. Both of these experiences at exactly the same time. But the yira is a yira of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in as much that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyochel lies within the Divrei Torah. That means Yiras Hashem, there's always a din of Yiras Hashem. Here there's a very unique form of Yiras Hashem. It's a Yiras Hashem, which is Yiras HaTorah. Because the Torah, in essence, all the covet and the maila of the Torah is through the elokus, which is linked to it. Therefore, there's a Yiras HaTorah because of the elokus which lies within it. And the Yira brings an enormous avo, because the feeling that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was willing to be metzamtzem himself into the Dvar Halacha, which I can connect to. This is the unbelievable, these are the tnoim which are needed to the approach to Limud Torah. When you sit to learn Torah, all these things have to go through your mind. Carries on the Ramchal. V'nichlol bazeh, included within this, says the Ramchal, shelo yeshiv bekalus roish. You can't sit in any form of kalus roish. V'lo yinog shum minug bizoyin, lo bidvoreo, v'lo bisforeo, v'yedo lifnei mi oimed umisasek. I should know who you're standing in front of. That means my yira is for the Torah itself, because the Torah in essence represents to me, or it is for me the form of connecting to the elokus which is metzumtzum within it. If these will be his kavones, then his Talmud will be in the way it should be. And you'll be zeicha through the limud of the Torah to the shefa which is connected to it. And then he will be zeicha to the shefa velakus, and the whole world will be zeicha to the tikkun. אבל אם תנאי זה יחזר ממנו, אם חס ושלום, as somebody approaches limud Torah without this understanding and without this intent, that means an intent to be zeicha through the Torah to the shefa which is kosher to it. But if he does not have this intention in mind, im t'nai ze yachsa mimenu lo timoshech ha'ora al yodoi, he will not get that hora. That means I have to approach limud Torah al daita dahochi, that I want through this to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I know HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Torah as a kli, a vehicle through which one can connect to Him. And therefore my intent is to connect through this. But if somebody does not have this kavana, then lo timoshech ha'or al yodoi. Lo yiu dvorov elo k'shor kol hadiburim hareishim. Then the words become no more than intellectual, an exercise book. Any form of knowledge which you find in any exercise book. Hegyoinoi, and his reading will be k'koirei geres, like reading a book, a letter, umachshavoisov, and when he's ma'ayin and he thinks about the sugya, it'll be k'choishe b'divrei ilom. In the same way that a mathematician will think about a mathematical problem, a physicist will think about a problem of neutrons and atoms and quantum and quarks, v'chulei v'chulei. So a Jewish philosopher will think about problems of Zika. But there's no difference between it. V'adarabba, says the Ramchal, la'ashmo techoshev loi. Not only will he not be zeicher to the shefa, but he will be considered an avera. Shekora vela kodesh belimoira, umekel roishe lifnei boiroi, oidoi medaber lefonov umisasek b'kedushaso yizborach. Says the Ramchal, divrei Torah. It's like, you know what it is? I've given you the key. I've given you the vessel where within it I lie. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, kutsh bricho v'reisa chodo. I've given you the vessel within this I lie, and you can't be bothered to open it. Not only can't you be bothered to open it, you treat it with disrespect. If you've been given a key to open up the door and you don't open the door, that's disrespectful. Disrespectful. And that will be considered an ashmo. Now each person with the level of moiro and the level of covet with which he approaches the Torah, ken yeshu yakor halimud umadregas hashpoa nimsheches al yodei. It's just unbelievable. Now let me just 1 second bring you to the famous machlekes, the famous argument between the Chassidim and Reb Chaim Volozhiner. And for that he wrote, Reb Chaim Volozhiner wrote Shah Dalet in Nefesh HaChaim. Now the argument was whether what's the madrega of lishmo needed in the person who learns it. Whether a person has to sit, when a person comes to learn Gemara, so the Chassidim said there has to be b'kedusha v'tayra. B'kedusha v'tayra, with kavonis gedoles ad moed, of to be mekayim tzayno yizborach. Yes? And they weren't stopped talking. I mean, they were talking after they read this Ramchal. Learning Torah ain't just another mitzvah. It's something else completely. Learning Torah is touching God. And in the way that Ramchal says, that's why when you're kavayochel, you're being nigosh lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Said the Chassidim, can you imagine the kedusha and the Torah which is needed to prepare a person just before he starts learning Torah. And the kavonis that you got to be mechavan to be all sorts of kavonis of what's it called comes from Chaim Volozhiner. We don't have time to talk about it all. But Chaim Volozhiner came along and he said, "Als gerecht, you're right. But I don't need to address the lishma to HaKadosh Baruch Hu." That means all other mitzvahs, the lishma, the address, my focus has to be Likut Shabrichu, up there. I have to look up there. I have to look up there in the same way they say the Sfard we do. When you do mitzvah, you look up there, L'Shem Kut Shabrichu. It's all for you. I'm coming here to do for you to be matak in the world. Said the Chaim Volozhiner, Torah needs more, you're right, because it's Kut Shabrichu, but also it needs less. Why does it need less? Because the kavonas have to be to learn L'Shem Torah. Because Torah is the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That means I don't have to be mechaven lemalo. I have to be mechaven for the Torah. And says Chaim Volozhiner, he didn't say it. I'm just like saying a moshel. If I would be Chaim Volozhiner, I'd say, and all this lies in the first three words which you read today. Hatnoim atzrichim lislavos letalmud, said the Ramchal, was Hayiro betalmud atzmoi. The awe in the Talmud. What do you mean, the awe in the Talmud? Yiras Hashem. What's Yiras HaTalmud? Because Torah is the representation of Elokus in this world. So when you mechaven L'Shem Torah, and you understand what Torah is, that is the Kavana. In the same way the Ramchal says you have to have Yiras HaTorah, says the Chaim Volozhiner, you need to have what? You mechaven L'Shem Limud Torah. Everyone else have to mechaven L'Shmo. But when it comes to Torah, you mechaven L'Shem Limud Torah. Because when I stand in front of the Torah, my focus is not on HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lemalo. It's on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which lies within the Torah itself. In the Kudsha Barichu, which lies within the Torah. In that way, Torah is completely unique. But you know what the best thing is? After the Ramchal, after Nefesh HaChaim has spent 5 prokim saying that you don't have to forget Kedisha, forget Torah. You don't need any of this. You need to have Mechavan L'Shem Torah, L'Shem Torah, L'Shem Torah. After all that, he says, just one, he says, just want to add just one little note, says Reb Chaim Volozhiner, in Perek Vov. Lezois ha'emes, after all that I've argued with the Chassidim, I just want to tell you one little thing. He says, B'chol eis, before a person sits down to learn, Yochin Odom Atzmoi Lilmoid, how should he prepare himself? Roloi Lisyashev Koidem Shiaschil, Al Kol Ponim Zmamuot, B'yiras Hashem Tohiro, B'tairas Halev, Lisvadois Al Chatosoi. That means, I don't agree with the Chassidim, yeah, but a video you have to have. Sorry. Can't just come sit and learn. You've got to sit and think about your life. Do tshuva and vidui every time you sit and learn. Every time. Oh, by the way, says Reb Chaim Volozhiner, v'yechavein lehizdabek belimud b'Torah. Be mechaven to what? No, don't have to be mechaven kutsha brichu, but mechaven to be dovuk b'Torah, boy b'Torah, which is boy b'Kodesh Baruch Hu. That means, by the way, I really agree to every word that the Chassidim say. It's scary to start learning. You're standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And don't think for 1 second you don't have to do vidui, alchet, and tshuva every time. So don't think you just walk in with a bit, okay? But here comes my machlokes. His kavana should be lis dabek boy batoira, boy bakodesh bochu, the kutsha brichu vayraisa choda. If somebody could really explain to me what the machlokes in Chassidim and Reb Chaim Volozhiner was, it's so small. In essence, it's scary to come and learn. And that's what the Ramchal is talking about. There is a hakdoma, a t'nai, a way in where we're meant to approach learning. And that's the approach of knowing that I'm going nigosh lifnei HaKodesh Baruch Hu. A few moments for vidu is enough. So I'll be meichel all of you, if you just take 10 minutes, 5 minutes before you sit and learn, and think about your averos and do viduing. That's perfectly enough, says Reb Chaim Volozhiner. Can you imagine what the Baal Shem Tov said you needed to do before you started learning? And all that because limud Torah is a vessel to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therein, T-H-E-R-E, therein, within the Torah, lies Elokus itself. But here's the thing. The Yiro has to be the Yiro for the Torah, because there's a Yiro for the Elokus that lies within the Torah. Rabbi say, just a little bit. Now you understand when I say we're back home in the Beis Medrash. Do you know where we are? Do you understand what's going on here? Do you understand? Do you understand? We're touching him here. We should be zeicher to be nigosh lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and to be oisek b'divrei Torah, and be dovuk b'toirosai uboy ki kutsha brichu v'raisa choda. Erev tov agiten.
Shkoyach.
Shkoyach, kol tov. Baruch Hashem, kol tov.